Coming up on Arirang News, the United States, as President Trump promised to do, labels China a currency manipulator after the Chinese yuan plunges to levels not seen since the financial crisis a decade ago. South Korea's current account surplus fell to a 7-year low in the first half of the year as exports took a major hit from a slower global economy and a slump in semiconductor shipments. And North Korea launches its 4th round of missiles in less than 2 weeks. The North is protesting the start of joint military drills by South Korea and the United States. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. This was North Korea's 4th round of missiles fired in the past 13 days. This time it fired them from the western side of the peninsula. Meanwhile, the regime is criticizing the joint military drills by South Korea and the U.S. that started yesterday. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said North Korea launched the 2 short-range missiles in the early hours of Tuesday towards the EC at around 5:24 a.m. and 5:36 a.m. Korea time from its southwestern county of Hwayil in Hwanghae-namdo province. The missiles had an altitude of around 37 kilometers and flew some 450 kilometers, recording a maximum flight speed of Mach 6.9. That's around 8,500 kilometers an hour. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missiles seem to have similar characteristics to the short-range ballistic missiles fired by the North on July 25th, and said they are working with the U.S. to verify further information about the missiles while monitoring the situation for additional launches. The Joint Chiefs of Staff believe the North test-fired a new type of short-range ballistic missile, North Korea's version of Russia's Iskander-class missile. It's believed that they're harder to intercept due to its complicated flight trajectory, although the Joint Chiefs of Staff made reassurances that they're able to neutralize the missiles by North Korea with the existing Patriot anti-missile system. Tuesday's launch came a day after South Korea and the U.S. began their combined military exercise. The crisis management staff training kicked off on Monday as a preliminary session in the run-up to their summertime command post exercise, which is expected to start this Sunday and continue for about 3 weeks. The drill is aimed at testing South Korea's initial operational capability for the envisioned transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. Issuing a statement right after the firing on Tuesday, North Korea's foreign ministry criticized the South for conducting exercises, which it says are simulations of preemptive strikes against Pyongyang. It also criticized the U.S. for supplying new weapons, including the F-35A fighter jets, to the South. The North said it still seeks dialogue as means to resolve issues, but that the continuation of provocative military acts would harm the momentum of dialogue, calling the joint exercise a violation of the series of joint agreements they signed with the South. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's top security officials have agreed to closely monitor the situation regarding North Korea's launch of projectiles in close coordination with the U.S. An emergency meeting chaired by National Security Advisor Chung Yi-yong was held at the presidential office this morning, shortly after the launch of the projectiles. According to Blue House spokesperson Ko Min-jung, they assessed the North's intentions behind the launch, as well as the general security situation surrounding the Korean peninsula. They agreed to maintain thorough surveillance and readiness. The UK will join U.S. efforts to protect tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz from an increasingly aggressive Iran. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says the UK has to respond now to uphold freedom of navigation. Many countries still cautious, though. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has once again pressed Washington's closest Asian allies to help out. Speaking in Australia, Pompeo mentioned South Korea and Japan by name for the second straight day. He said the U.S. wants to make sure Iran doesn't do anything risky and wants to protect the South Korean and Japanese economies, which depend on oil and goods delivered through the region. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is warning that the U.S. decision to pull out of a decades-old nuclear weapons treaty could reignite a global nuclear arms race. However, he stressed that he is ready to resume talks with Washington anytime. Kim Da-mi reports.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that the U.S. withdrawal from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty could spark an unrestrained arms race. Putin said on Monday that Moscow would be forced to start developing intermediate and short-range missiles if it's confident that Washington has begun the production of its own weapons. Russia also pointed out that the U.S. withdrawal from the INF Treaty would be a serious blow to the international security.
Far-reaching consequences for the international security and strategic stability systems are inevitable. The American side is to be solely blamed for that.
And in case of any U.S. attack before the development of new weapons, he said his country will cope with any threats with its existing weapons. But the Russian leader also made sure to note that there will be no case where his country will launch any intermediate and short-range missiles first. And he also reached out to the U.S. saying Russia is ready to resume fully fledged negotiations on strategic stability and security anytime. He argued that serious talks are much needed in order to avoid any confusion where there is no set of rules or laws. Over the past weekend, the U.S. expressed its hope for possible deployment of intermediate-range missiles in Asia.
But let's be clear, I'm talking about conventional weapons. INF range, right? Exactly. And I would prefer months. I just don't have I don't have the latest state of play on timelines for either a cruise missile or long-range missile as the Army was preparing it. But these things tend to take longer than you expect.
The U.S. formally left the accord last Friday after determining Moscow was violating the treaty. 김다미, Arirang News.
In other news, South Koreans won a clean sweep of trophies at the annual World Youth Baduk, or GO, Championship that was recently held in Malaysia. Korea's Yang Yu-jun won the senior tournament, defeating a Chinese opponent in the final, and Jung Jun-woo won the junior tournament for under-12s. It's the fourth time Team Korea's won both tournaments at the second longest running amateur Baduk tournament in the world. The championship has seen a number of strong participants eventually rise through the ranks to become world champions, including South Korea's Lee Se-do. The worsening situation between South Korea and Japan has spread to the sporting world. 7 out of 10 South Korean professional basketball teams have called off scheduled off-season training in Japan. 8 women's pro basketball and volleyball teams have also canceled or plan to cancel training in Japan and are scouting out local places to train instead. Local sporting competitions are making similar moves. Gangneung City had previously invited teams from China and Japan to a friendly curling competition, but decided Monday to pull financial support for the Japanese team. The Board of Basketball Competition will make a decision Wednesday on whether to revoke invitations to 2 Japanese teams for an event in late August. The season's 8th typhoon is just now making landfall along South Korea's southern coast, bringing heavy showers and relatively strong winds. That's Typhoon Francisco, which is forecast to slowly make its way across the Korean peninsula over the coming days, but will gradually run out of steam as it heads out into the East Sea. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Typhoon Francisco has South Korea locked in its sights. The storm is forecast to make landfall on the south coast on Tuesday afternoon. The typhoon is small in size, but has developed into a medium-intensity storm. Weather experts say the typhoon will move over the Japanese island of Kyushu before arriving on the Korean peninsula. Its passage over Japan's landmass will weaken the effect of the typhoon once it arrives in South Korea. The typhoon is forecast to sweep through South Korea's inland regions this week before departing into the East Sea near the eastern coastal city of Sokcho.
The typhoon will arrive on Tuesday. By Wednesday, we'll see rain nationwide. Gyeongsang, Gangwon, and Yeongdong will see 20 to 50 millimeters of rain an hour.
Coastal areas in South Gyeongsang-do Province and Gangwon-do Province are expected to be hit the hardest, with upwards of 200 millimeters of rain. Weather officials are urging residents to take precautions, as strong winds of up to 30 meters an hour could cause trees to topple. The season's 9th typhoon, Lakima, is also currently making its way toward the Korean peninsula and could develop into a super typhoon. However, experts forecast it'll likely to veer to Japan or Taiwan instead. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Following a plunge in the value of the Chinese yuan on Monday, the Trump administration has officially designated China a currency manipulator. That's something no administration has done since Bill Clinton was president. Some analysts say it's now an all-out currency war. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The U.S. Department of Treasury has designated China as currency manipulator, a historic move that no administration has exercised since 1994. Based on its decision, the Treasury Department said in a statement Monday that Secretary Steven Mnuchin will engage with the International Monetary Fund to eliminate the unfair competitive advantage created by Beijing's currency moves. He also said Beijing's pattern of actions is also a violation of China's G20 commitments to refrain from competitive devaluation of its currency. This follows President Trump's strong criticism against Beijing on Monday, made as the Chinese yuan dropped to its lowest levels against the U.S. dollar in 11 years. He said in a tweet that this is called, quote, currency manipulation. He also expressed his dissatisfaction in the U.S. Federal Reserve, continuing to push the Fed to cut interest rates to weaken the strong dollar. He also slammed China for stealing American businesses and factories, hurting American jobs through its currency manipulation. The yuan dropped and crossed the psychologically sensitive level of 7 to the U.S. greenback on Monday, the lowest level since the global financial crisis in 2008. His comments come less than 3 months after his own administration decided not to label China a currency manipulator. They also come just days after Trump proposed an additional 10% tariff on Chinese imports worth $300 billion that would take effect on September 1st. Some analysts forecast Beijing's tinkering with the yuan and the rapid U.S. designation of China as a currency manipulator could trigger an all-out currency war between Washington and Beijing. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Yesterday, some were calling it Black Monday on the South Korean stock market, and today the slide continued. The benchmark Kospi fell another 1.5% to close at just over 1917. That's the lowest close since early 2016. The secondary Kosdaq market, which yesterday lost almost 7.5%, was down another 3.2% today to 551 points. That's its lowest close since the very end of 2014. The Korean currency held steady against the U.S. dollar, though, having plunged the previous day. It's now at around 12.15 against the greenback. South Korea's startup minister has called on the country's SMEs and big businesses to join forces against what she called Japan's economic assault. Park Young-sun said on Tuesday that at a time when Korea's economy is going through a structural change, it must overcome weaknesses. She stressed that the country's small and medium-sized firms and large corporations need an efficient division of roles to create synergy. The minister pledged to roll out joint R&D investment, test beds for new technologies, and other platforms for cooperation to help Korean industries build economic resilience. A fiery debate is underway at the National Assembly's House Steering Committee, with rival lawmakers grilling President Moon Jae-in's top advisors over Japan's trade curbs. The ruling party stressed that Tokyo will be responsible for any potential repercussions from here on and demanded stern countermeasures. Opposition parties attacked the government for what they claim is its inability to deal with diplomatic and economic crises, and questioned the effectiveness of the measures put forward by the government to help local businesses. Lawmakers also quizzed the top office on the possibility of scrapping a military intel sharing pact with Japan, to which they said they're considering it carefully, given that August 24th is a deadline to decide whether to extend the deal. The presidential office also said it's preparing for all possible scenarios and is devising measures that maximize national interest and minimize the potential fallout. It's time now for an in-depth look at the global markets on this Tuesday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at QM Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So a whole host of factors have hit the Korean markets this week, including the escalation of the U.S.-China trade war, and this being the first week of trading since Japan said it's taking Korea off its white list. Yesterday, the Kospi down 2%, the Kosdaq absolutely hammered, down 7%, and today they continued to fall. What's the story today?
Yes, as you said, stocks were suffering the worst week starting from beginning of the August. If you look at the U.S. market, S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial were tumbled by 3.2% yesterday, and the Nasdaq was plunged nearly 4%. All this is about China and U.S. Trade dispute. The tariff of 10% that we're talking about by Trump is making the Chinese government to retaliate. And if you see the yuan, it has depreciated to well above 7, clearly making Trump administration announcing the Chinese government as the currency manipulators. All these are putting a huge uncertainties in terms of the economic growth numbers. Global economic growth rates are slowing down as already. And the question mark is that this kind of dispute continuing might affect the economic slowdown to the level of a recession. If that's the case, then equity market could fall further. However, though, we think that there will be continuation of the liquidity injection by both countries. So quite aggressive monetary policy is expected. In any case, all these uncertainties still linger on. As you said, the Kospi continues to fall. Since the beginning of this month, it's down almost 7%. Kosdaq is down almost 15% since the beginning of this month. Also, Nikkei is down another 0.7% after falling 1.7% yesterday. Chinese equity market also falling quite sharply by close to 12% plus.
Well, now, as you referenced, with China for the first time since the financial crisis, the RMB trading at more than 7 to the dollar. President Trump, as he said he would, has now designated China a currency manipulator. What has China done here? And on the U.S. side, why the designation now?
Yes, as you said, the U.S. Treasury Department on Monday designated China as the currency manipulator. It is a historic move that no White House has exercised since the Clinton administrations. The Secretary Shin said that under the President Trump's order, they have determined that China is a currency manipulator. As a result of this determination, Secretary Shin will engage with the International Monetary Fund to eliminate the unfair competitive advantage created by China's latest actions. The question mark is obviously clearly the yuan, the currency is heavily regulated by the government of China, and it has fallen to 7 renminbi to US dollars. It is the highest number that we've seen since 2008. Clearly, this does create some price competitiveness in terms of the exporting goods. Obviously, the Chinese government is not listening to what U.S. is saying. In fact, if there continue to be a problem about selling products to U.S. through various tariffs, then China has to depend on the domestic economy in terms of growth. If you want to create domestic growth, you need currency appreciation, not depreciation. So right now, it seems that the Chinese government is not really, going with what U.S. is asking, and that's why U.S. is trying its best to put pressure on to Chinese government. After designation of this currency manipulations, they can even actually raise additional tariff further, creating the cost competitiveness to be disappeared. And also, U.S. government is talking about Fed lowering interest rate further to help this type of dispute that's happening right now. So clearly it is moving into more of a currency war in the future.
Yeah, and this undoubtedly affects other markets in the region. How does the designation of currency manipulator affect the markets of neighboring countries?
Yes, I mean, obviously it's affecting the currencies, exchange rate, and overall equity market in general. If you look at it, the PBOC, Chinese Central Bank, have fixed the yuan rate at 6.9683 today. After that, obviously, it went up again, so well above 7 against the greenback. And also, if you look at Korean won, it has depreciated to 12.15 won to dollar rate, while Japanese yen appreciated actually to 105 level. However, today it kind of rebounded to 106.7 level. You need a financial market stabilization. In order to see that kind of stabilization, what you need to see is the dollar depreciation against the global currency gradually. Right now, there's continuation of the fight between the countries in regards to trade side. We need to see dollar depreciation affecting global liquidity to increase, and if the global liquidity increase, the market can rebound. But for the time being, we don't see that. We are seeing various countries' currencies depreciating, particularly China as well as Korea. This is definitely negative news for overall market. You need to see won appreciation as well as a renminbi appreciation to see those markets go up. Also, in order for dollar to U.S. market to rebound again, we need to see some currency depreciation. So for the time being, it seems to moving opposite direction. However, though, in the future, we do think that U.S. government's effort to depreciate currency will have an effect, and that could cause a possible rebound of the global equity market.
Interesting times these days, Mr. Yu. That's all we'll have time for today, though. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, South Korea's balance of payments has been slipping in recent months due to slower global trade as well as a decline in the country's key export items. The country saw a steep decline in its current account surplus in the first half of this year. Oh Soo-young has more.
South Korea recorded its lowest current account surplus in 7 years during the first 6 months of this year, amid the slowdown of global trade and weaker export figures. The Bank of Korea's figures released on Tuesday show the country's current account surplus recorded $21.7 billion from January to June, an on-year decline of 24.6%. Despite the smaller deficit in the services account, a significant decrease in export figures reduced the total surplus. Exports fell by 8.5% as the country's key export items recorded sizable drops. The amount of semiconductor exports in dollars slipped by 21.7%. Electrical and electronic goods, along with petroleum and steel products, also tumbled significantly compared to the previous year. Imports were also down by 5.1% on year, shrinking the scale of the country's balance of payments from trade. A central bank official noted that the trade conflict between the US and China and the sluggish global economy had also taken their toll on Korea's current account. Korea in June posted its highest current account surplus in 8 months. However, both exports and imports of goods continue to decline by 16% and 12% on year respectively. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's imports of high-tech products from Japan are declining, a trend that's expected to become even more pronounced amid Tokyo's export curbs. Seoul's Ministry of Science and ICT said Tuesday that ICT imports from Japan were down 11.4% on year in the first half, totaling just over $4.8 billion US. Japan's share of Korea's ICT imports was also down 1.2 percentage points from last year when it was at 10% of the market. South Korea's ICT exports to Japan over the same period were down 8.5% to roughly $2 billion. From now on, anyone who's visited North Korea or lived there at any time since March 2011 will not be allowed into the United States using its special visa waiver system known as ESTA. They'll have to apply for an ordinary visa. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security announced the new measures on Monday. ESTA allows people from 38 countries, including South Korea, to visit the U.S. for up to 90 days without a visa. There are only a few exceptions for diplomats and military-related cases. The U.S. applies similar restrictions to people who visited certain other countries, including Iraq, Iran, and Syria. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry, this rule change will apply to some 37,000 South Koreans. The Seoul city government is accepting submissions for its I Seoul You photo and video contest. The contest theme is coexistence, passion, composure. Videos must be 10 seconds to 5 minutes long, and photos can be both digital and printed. Seoul City will select 59 works for prizes of up to 30 million Korean won, or around $25,000 US. Submissions will be accepted starting today until September 30th. Application forms can be downloaded from the Seoul City website and submitted through the website on screen now. Foreign applicants can submit their work by email at iseoulu@goodcontest.co.kr. The winners will be announced at the end of October. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.